Hello and welcome to this episode of the Vitality Secret Podcast. I am delighted to be here and honored to be here with Mark Hinds. Mark Hinds is the CEO and founder of Resonant Technologies Group. Mark's superpower is in working to support the extraordinary minds and souls of the individuals on planet Earth that understand the emerging field of resonance physics. Resonance physics is the science that explains the most vexing challenges in physics, in science, in natural resources, in energy, in human health, can all be solved by understanding and emulating how nature functions. So, Mark, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. I really am honored to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Neil.
Before we start, I've got to ask you, what is that image behind you? It's amazing.
So the image behind me. Well, what it is, make sure I take a look at it. Yeah. So it's idea of fractals, right? And the understanding, especially for us, that first everything emerges out of the space. So like the center of those little vortices represents, space, and then as space becomes more coherent, and then there's more energy and coherency in a little particular vector of space, then things begin to emerge out of that, like stuff.
Beautiful. Yeah. I love these fractal images I've been seeing on various presentations and the likes of Gaia. It's phenomenal. The sacred geometry, universal geometry, and you just touched on a word very poignant in my life. One I'm using a lot right now is coherence and harmony and energy. This is what excites me the most right now. On the topic of excitement, what is it that excites you the most right now about what you are doing?
Yeah, great question. So I would say what excites me the most is that, well, I guess we have to first look at a little pain, and then the excitement or the pleasure that can emerge from the pain. So if we look at what's happening in the world today in the last couple of years, we've probably experienced the greatest amount of contraction that we've really ever experienced, or at least maybe in some modern times, whether COVID, economical, political, societal, philosophical, almost every single aspect of our existence is becoming either contracted or really divisive. And so, go ahead, please.
Oh, that's so interesting. And the word polarizing comes as well. Very divisive, and so much polarization happening in our world, where friends and family have almost become in a situation where many are separated and turned against each other.
Yes, and I think a lot of that, if not almost all of it, emerges out of a dearth of truth. Meaning, whether we're talking about COVID and vaccines or environmental issues or global warming, whatever it is, there's beliefs, there's ideas, but how do we look at an actual truth of these things? And so, to kind of go back to your original question, what I'm excited about is that there's a science that's starting to emerge, that is starting to get taken seriously. There's a set of technologies behind the science that's starting to emerge and starting to be taken very seriously, that allows us to move past belief, that allows us to move past dogma, that allows us to move past philosophical understanding and say, okay, wow, here's a data set that is pretty solid, that allows us to say, okay, we can begin to have a sort of a cohesive understanding of how these problems can be solved, of what's really going on, which actually kind of brings both sides together. And this understanding is what we call resonance physics, meaning resonance science, looking at how nature functions and then being in resonance with that. And
yeah,
I can maybe just touch on that a little bit more.
Please do, yeah.
Okay. So, it's interesting if we're trying to solve these problems, let's say whatever may be, new energy technologies or health technologies or vaccines, whatever it is, yet there's really even no understanding of the most fundamental aspects of our existence. So on human health, 37 trillion cells in the human body, and most likely every one of those cells doing hundreds of millions of events a second. So we're talking 37 trillion times hundreds of millions every second in your body. What's coordinating that? Where's the information vector that's allowing all of that to happen? Right? Or if every one of your cells were optimal, they'd be producing 0.2 of a volt of electricity, whereby the cell is so healthy that a virus that would come in would just basically, it would be impenetrable to it. And if we, that's like a few trillion volts of electricity in the body. That's not well known. And I can begin to list many, many, many examples, such as a human body operating at 98.5 degrees for 24 hours. If you do the math of the physics of this is very well known. So if I take a pound of water and I heat that water 1 degree, how much energy, how many BTUs of energy is required to allow that to happen? Okay. So, I've got one of our little water bottles here, and I touch it. It's pretty cool. It's probably about 70 degrees or so.
Okay.
60. Now, in just a little bit of my body, that water is going to be 98.5 degrees.
My goodness.
If we do the math of what's required to heat that water, like let's say for me, 110 pounds of water, 120 pounds of water, but we start to get into tens of thousands of calories needed to be able to heat that. You're not consuming that. So again, but I could go on and I could list so many examples of that. And then if we just even look away from health, something such as a magnet, trillions of magnets in the world today doing really incredible things. And as we move more towards the electrification of the world and electric motors, magnets, yet if I if I put a magnet on my refrigerator and it holds up a little piece of 8x10 paper for 10 years, do you know that although anybody listening to this that's a physicist, they might get a little upset at it, but there's no physics, science on planet Earth in the standard model of physics that can explain how that works, because the magnet defies the laws of thermodynamics. It's producing much more work than energy it's consuming. They'll say, oh, well, the ferrous thing and this thing are binding. Okay, that's great. But something has to hold something up. If my arm had to do that for 10 years, that would be a lot of energy expending. Okay? But I could list 100 examples of this, or the nucleus of every atom that's spinning at near the speed of light forever. Where does the energy of that come from?
I love it. Yeah.
The best explanation today is that every atom emerged out of the Big Bang and has been spinning in a frictionless environment ever since, which a 10-year-old kid hears that and they go, huh? I can rub my hands together, get a little heat, and show we do not live in a frictionless environment. Right?
Interesting. Okay.
Okay. And the new physics that's emerging shows that the Big Bang was an idea that was postulated over 100 years ago. That was almost a fantasy, and somehow it became an idea. There's no evidence ever to support a Big Bang. So, and I'm elucidating on just a couple of things, but we start to go, okay, wow, we don't really have the basis of understanding of anything that we're doing, how the body works. Where's the energy of it coming? Where's the coherency of it coming from? Where's every cell, every atom? How is all of this working? So with this idea of resonant science, it answers all of these questions. And basically what we're saying is that everything, the atom, the magnet, the cell, is in resonance with this field of energy and information we exist within. And that everything emerges out of this field in different degrees. It becomes a cell or a piece of glass or a screen that I look at. Right? It becomes something, but everything emerges out of that. And especially what you're dealing with vitality and health, we can start to break this down to a simple formula that most likely all health, all disease, aging is a result really of one thing. The
May I
degree of,
guess?
go ahead.
Is it the lowering of frequency,
No, well,
dropping voltage?
no. It's
Oh,
the degree of resonance or dissonance
oh
that
yeah,
we have with this field.
got it. Yeah,
That's it. Because that's where all this energy to power this system is coming from. It's already, we know maybe a small amount of our actual energy is coming from calorie intake. The
got it.
rest of it,
Yeah,
the rest of it was all coming from the field. And so aging and disease, yes, there's many things about frequency and thought and all, and that's a part of it. And then diet and then environmental factors. All of those things start to decrease. It's like static. Or a good example would be like a solar panel, and then the sun. And if there's no clouds, you've got a great degree of energy opportunity between the sun and the solar panel.
right. Yes.
You get some clouds between,
Yeah.
the energy potential goes down. And that's what happens with the human being, is that we start to build up static, let's say, between our cellular biology and the field we live in. And so that degree of resonance is decreased. And so energy goes down, vitality goes down. And so all of these things that we do, meditate, thoughtfulness, diet, environmental things, it's really just to increase our degree of coherency with the field.
That's brilliant. I love that explanation. The reason I said a drop in frequency is one of Joe Dispenza's. I'm sure you're familiar with Dr.
Yes.
Joe Dispenza. He talks about how all illness is the result of a drop in frequency, and I'm sure he'd also agree with you that it's dissonance. It's not being in harmony with this field of intelligence that surrounds us and we're a part of. One thing about the field, I'd just like to bring in one of his examples actually at an advanced retreat I attended in Cancun. He's got a lot of science, as you have. And they've been testing people for years and years and years. And they had a scientist on stage, and he said, can you verify that there's new information in the blood? There's new anti-cancer metabolites. We've got a change in DNA and all these new proteins and information. And the scientist confirmed that it was there. And he just said, I don't know how it's there. And he kind of joked and said, apparently that's appeared from focusing on nothing.
I can answer that.
Oh, can you? Brilliant.
Yes. So I'll give you an example. So first of all, we have to understand that the information of everything that has ever been or ever will be is in the field. Okay. So the idea is how do we tap into that information set? So one of our companies is called Upterra. And some years ago, about 5 years ago, so Upterra is using the principles of this in agriculture. The website is upterra.co.
I'll check it out.
Yes. And so we did a study with a third-party group on cannabis. So they took 2 sets of clones. Okay. One set of clones, excuse me, and then divided them into 2 sets. So 24 clones went over here, then 24 clones went over here into two separate rooms. The rooms were in a space, like 2 different greenhouses, exact same elevation, exact same water supply, everything. And then they went to grow. I don't really remember how long the study was, but until the plants got too big for the room they were in. And then they took the plants and then they ran them through a third-party group that looked at the genetic profile, the phytochemical profile, and all of that of the plants. And some really interesting things happened. So the group that was using our technology to replace chemicals had some very interesting attributes, which was a significant increase in the whole cannabinoid profile, an increase in the THC profile. But what was really extraordinary is that there was a 150% increase in the genetic profile.
My
Meaning,
goodness.
meaning those genes were not, like, if they would have looked at that and if they would have done a whole genealogy before that, they would have seen that those genes did not exist in that plant and those clones at that point. Now the other clones, they tested those, they didn't have that expression in them. So where did they emerge out of? Okay, so what Joe's saying, of course, is completely correct. But we can imagine that the frequency is much more complex. So it's not just a frequency. We would call it an electromagnetic signature. So it's a very, very, very complex frequency. And that electromagnetic signature is sort of like a channel on your radio. Okay, so let's say you have a radio, or let's say a satellite dish, and your satellite dish can get 30 channels. Okay, now you add a little doohickey into the satellite dish, now all of a sudden you can get 90 channels. So all that information was there, right? But your dish just didn't have the bandwidth to get all of those channels.
Tune in. Interesting.
Okay, so if you can introduce, let's say, a technology, or if you can introduce, like, let's say Dr. Dispenza, what Joe's doing, and my very good friend and partner of almost 20 years, Nassim Haremein, has spoken with.
I wanted to bring him in, yeah.
With Joe multiple times, but so if we can introduce thinking or technologies that basically tune the oscillator, our antenna, to gather more data from the field, then we can have a different expression of biomarkers, of genetics, anything in our own biology. And so now we can actually quantify how we can begin doing that simply by introducing technologies that can expand the data set that we can connect with from the infinite amount of information in the field.
That's such a wonderful explanation. And you've helped to clarify how one of my very good healer friends who lives just there, she uses these electromagnetic signatures, as you've just said, these vials. She's got over 1,000 of them.
Like homeopathy almost.
Okay, yes. It's
yeah.
Type, yes, I guess so. And she's worked wonders with me and many people in the local environment and remotely, of course. So it's like tuning in your frequency or tuning in your receiver to the right frequency, isn't it? So you can kind of download that frequency from the field. Would that be fair?
I would. Yeah, I'd say I would like to move past the word frequency.
Okay.
And I'm not. But I think just for everybody, right? That we start because a frequency, we think of it as something like this, like a little wave, right?
Okay.
But a frequency, or like an electromagnetic signature, is much more complex. So imagine we have a wave that is like this. Okay. Now, so let's say the wave is like this. Now I'm going to turn that wave like this, okay? And I'm going to stop it right here and cut a section. Well, what I'm going to see is, first of all, that the wave it's three-dimensional. It looks like each one of these little lines at the top that we imagine, that's just the top of the expression of the frequency. Like a wave in the ocean, like if you see a wave move and there's a bottle, like unfortunately, there's a plastic bottle sitting in the water, the wave just goes up. The bottle doesn't move, right? Like just like your boat just goes up, if you're in the ocean, right?
Okay.
So because all of the wave is below, you're just seeing the top of the manifestation of it.
Oh, I see.
Huh. Okay. So all waves are three-dimensional in nature, but we just think of them as these little lines.
Yeah.
But they're not. They're like these balloons or these packets of data. And so every one of those frequencies has a very specific geometry to it also. The science of that is called cymatics. Maybe many of your listeners know, right?
Yep.
So now we can say, oh, wow, we can see through cymatics that 432 hertz has a very specific geometry. Well, then we can start to see that those substances that your healer next door is using has a very specific electromagnetic signature to it. The electric magnetic signature has a very specific geometry, and the geometry of that is what's actually docking with the receptor. The physical substance. So I'm going to kind of keep going into this.
We might be getting a bit technical.
I think so. Okay.
Yeah, so
but I'm going to just go one more because I think it'll be helpful.
Okay.
So, no atom has ever touched another atom.
Yes, I remember you saying this before.
Right?
In fact, there's
a little electrostatic charge around atoms. Right. So, like, push, they'll bounce off. Boom, boom, boom. They never actually touch. Okay.
Okay.
So I can extrapolate that up to a molecule, and then I can say, really, no molecule has ever really touched another molecule. Okay. So even though I think that this little thing is touching my hand, if I had a high-powered microscope, I could see there's a little boundary condition between the two. Otherwise, there'd be no boundary condition. This will just go right through my hand. The whole universe would just be a big blob. So if I consume a vitamin, a mineral, or a drug, and it's not touching me, how is it affecting me?
Now that's a head flip.
Well, it's not that, but now it'll come back to what I was talking about a moment ago. Okay?
Yeah, I'd love to tie this in. Yeah.
Well, that substance has an electromagnetic signature. If it has mass, if it exists, if you can see it, touch it, feel it, it has mass, it has an electromagnetic signature.
Okay.
Frequency. That frequency has very specific, that the signature of it has very specific geometry. That's what's actually docking with the receptor.
Got it.
So the molecule is just a carrier for the information set. That's why homeopathy works.
Yeah.
Because the information of it, the signature is still there.
How do drugs work? I mean,
well, the drug's a carrier. The molecule of that drug is a carrier for a very specific information set, right? A set of electromagnetic signatures. Those go in and they dock with the receptors.
Got it. Okay.
So every drug, every vitamin, every mineral is just a carrier for the data.
Interesting.
Right? So for instance, I can see my little patches here.
Yeah.
So this is one of our
nicotine patches.
No, this is one of our companies. And there's no physical substance in it, but they're changing people's lives.
Oh my goodness.
It's just the electromagnetic signature of the substance. It's like we have a pain patch. And people literally, it's changing so many people's lives that have been in chronic pain for their whole life. But now we can put a patch on the body with no chemicals, no substances of any kind. People, I have to be very careful of what I say for FDA things, but people are having really extraordinary experiences. The sleep patch, people have had problems sleeping their whole lives, they put it on. And I think all of this starts to tie back to even how we began. It's like, what am I most excited about? That you can start to see that, okay, wow, the science is emerging. We're now growing food and agriculture with this, so we can get rid of chemicals. We can reduce water consumption. We're starting to be able to create technologies that can go on the human body, that we don't need chemicals or substances anymore. And then there's many, many other things that are emerging based out of this.
That's incredible. Just related to that sticker you just pointed to on your chest, I have a quantum sticker on my phone,
right,
which has been tested, live blood analysis and various other tests, to reduce the effects or even mitigate the effects of the EMS from the phone. So this is apparently a quantum sticker. Right. Can you compare that with what you've just said? I mean, it's still going to be
right. So yes, I know the technology well. I've been contemplating it for 15 years. What you're talking about is putting like a sticker on a phone and having it mitigate the potential negativity of a microwave. Few challenges.
Okay.
With that. So basically, because it's not so much the phone itself that's doing anything. probably one of the greatest health challenges we're facing today.
I was about to ask. I was about to ask this. Brilliant.
Is EMF pollution, right? And now, with Starlink and these things, it's almost that we can't hide from it. And we talked much about waves, right? So the body makes an analog signal, right? So the human body is analog. Now what we're making with these other things are digital signals. And so now you've got this microwave going through the human body. So you've got a digital signal going through an analog system. It creates great amounts of incoherency, dissonance.
Yeah.
Because the body's like, what's this? And that 37 trillion times a few hundred million events a second is being disrupted. So that's the challenge that's coming from all of this EMF. So
I notice you're wearing cables and you're not wearing Bluetooth earpods in your ear.
Never.
Me neither. Never touched those things. Worst idea ever.
I'm thinking about having a little microwave, or a little less, and a battery. Right. Although people that have been using we call them hearing aids.
Oh yeah.
For some years have really seemed to not have very significant elevated levels of brain issues. Although don't know, potentially with Alzheimer's and those type of things, of having that in the head. There's potentially a lot of issues. I mean, the brain is an antenna.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah.
And if the antenna is skewed, if the signature of the antenna is skewed, then lots of challenging things can happen. So the quantum patch, I don't know, I think that'd be a whole another conversation.
Okay, we don't need to go there. I was just interested if there's a quick explanation.
No, it's completely different. It's completely different. These patches, like here, right here, so the pain relief one. So here's the patch, and you put it on, and it's specifically designed. It has data sets in it, electromagnetic signatures of substances that we would like to see that they have a pain mitigating effect.
Brilliant.
So they're very specific for a very specific purpose with a very specific data set.
I love it. I've sampled quite a few of these devices, which have hundreds of thousands of frequencies in them. You're probably familiar with these machines.
Oh yeah.
Bioresonance devices where you hold electrodes or you put them on your head and they measure every frequency in the body and they can tell where you're in and out of balance. I've sampled some of those, and they're getting so small, they're like half the size of a phone now, and they used to be the size of a room, as with everything. And related to that, there's a health clinic in LA I went to, and they had something very similar to what you're suggesting or what you're talking about, when they would give me basically a sticker to hang around my neck with frequency in it. So that's a similar thing. Fair?
What clinic is it?
Oh my goodness. It was a few years ago now.
Okay, yeah. So I would really need to know what it is that they're doing. But what we're talking about, I think, is different, not to negate anything that they're doing.
Sure.
But yeah, so what you're discussing with the devices, I was first most likely invented by Raymond Royal Rife.
Yes. Brilliant guy.
Which
pressed in the early 1900s, right?
Late 1930s, 40s, 50s. Yeah, and which even today, some of it's being called quackery, which of course is absolutely not true.
Yeah.
So what he did, actually, there's a couple people, three right around that time: Raymond Royal Rife, Dr. Ruth Drown, and then Wilhelm Reich. Like, all three of them should be some of the most well-known people in history, and I think they're all looked upon on general media as quacks or something.
Totally.
But what they were doing was extraordinary.
I understood that Royal Raymond Rife had a 100% success rate reversing cancers with frequency, and then the AMA did its usual suppression of all of this data and created a very poor picture of him, like many amazing inventors. Like, you're obviously familiar with Tesla, and you must be familiar with what has been suppressed that he invented as well. Nassim Haremein, you mentioned his name earlier, and I know you're his business partner. In fact, that's how we got connected. I don't know if you remember this, but talking about energy, I was reading a book on energy on the beach, and one of my what shall I say? I'm just gonna say the word. One of my heroes is him, and some of the people in the quantum space. No. And I spent a day with him at the Conference for Human Consciousness in London. I think it was 2018. Anyway, I was reading this book on energy. My client delayed an hour, and I thought, I'm just going to read for another hour. And I got up, and there Nassim Haremein was walking up the beach, and he just walked towards me, and I noticed him, and he was there with his girlfriend, and I just said, "Hey, are you Nassim?" And then we had a really awesome conversation on the beach. We talked about various things. We talked about the pyramids, and we talked about his new white paper, and we talked about a number of amazing topics, and health, of course, which is my passion. And then I posted a picture of us on social media, and then one of your colleagues connected you and me.
Okay.
So what is most exciting that you're working on with Nassim Haremein right now with regards to health?
Yeah, so a couple of things. So just for clear, so Nassim has his full-on projects,
okay.
With Taurus Tech.
Oh yes, I remember him talking about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm a part of that, but he has his whole own team there that's doing that, and then of course the art crystal that is getting out there. There's one of the art bottles.
Ah.
Yeah, and then
I've got something like that, but it's probably not as cool.
And then one of the crystals in. It's super great stuff. But now Dr. Beth McDougall and Nassim work pretty closely together on some of these things. And Beth and her team is the founder of what we think is potentially the most advanced wellness clinic on planet Earth right now, called Jyzen, Jyzen. So you can go to jyzen.com. And so what they're really looking at is using Nassim's understanding of, especially what's coming out in his new paper on ATP and mitochondria, which is basically the source of the energy of everything, and clearly articulating a science that allows us to tap in to the vector, to the source in the field where all of this energy of the ATP and mitochondria is coming from. And I can't talk a whole lot about what's coming in his new paper, but he and his team have figured out something just so extraordinary and so exciting about like almost an engineering solution of how to tap into that it's going to have very significant implications for longevity, wellness, vitality, everything, from a physics perspective. So to answer your question, from what the work that Nassim is doing on a health venue, that's probably the thing that I'm most excited to see start to come out and then to be shared with humanity.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Can you suggest what it might solve? Is it gonna solve the need for drugs for illness and dis-ease?
Well, so basically, if we understand that basically ATP is basically the energy that drives most of the processes in all living cells, right?
Right.
So, basically, I'm not an expert in this, but from the most fundamental layman understanding that I have is that this compound basically provides energy to drive most all the functions in the human body. So now, and the amount of ATP that's required, let's say, to exercise, to do strenuous things, even just a function, is actually, it's so much that there's no linear explanation, meaning there's much more required than the math would seem to allow, that the human body could just sort of make, that there has to be another source of it.
That's so interesting. I've never heard that explained.
Yes,
so we're basically not consuming sufficient calories or getting enough sunlight to create the energy.
It's much more sunlight. The field is filled with, the energy density of the field, of the vacuum. There's a lot of energy in it.
Yeah.
Huge amounts in every cubic centimeter of space, right? Even between my fingers. And so it has nothing to do with sunlight, it has nothing to do with anything. It has to do with the space. Like in the darkness of space, there's the exact same amount of energy is there that's right here. Okay. So what it comes down to is how do we increase the level of coherency of that exchange of energy and information with the field, very specifically, let's say for ATP. Then we would be able to tap into an almost unlimited energy source for the human body of extraordinary vitality and longevity, simply by tapping into that data set of ATP in the field.
Interesting. Wow.
So that's why in the very beginning, again, what's the most exciting thing? It's all about moving to this understanding of resonance, right? That, what we've been doing is the species is dissonant to how nature functions, blowing up a hydrocarbon, splitting an atom, using chemicals. Nature doesn't do that.
We've got to get back to nature, haven't we? We've been taken away from nature for so many years.
Yeah. And this science and this set of technologies emerging, that's what it's based on.
I love that. Going back to nature. Nature always has the answers, doesn't she? Always. Yes, and messing with her, not a good idea. Yeah.
No, we're just, many years ago, we just didn't have the understanding of how to couple to it. How do we couple to it from a technological perspective? And Nassim, I believe, is the greatest human on planet Earth that's been able to articulate the aspects of this field, right? Like here's the actual attributes of it. And then once we understand the attributes of something, we can begin working in coherency with it. So
interesting.
And from that, we're going to see. I know we're getting close to time here.
I realize that. Yeah.
I think we could. What I would even postulate is that we had the revolution 120 years ago or so of moving from making things by hand to making things with machines, the Industrial Revolution. We had a revolution 50 years ago or so, 40 years ago, from analog to digital.
Yeah.
And we're very slowly this year and much faster next year going to be moving to the biggest revolution humanity's ever experienced, which will be very good for your listeners to understand that there's a tremendous amount of hope coming. Because
amazing.
I think the number one thing we're lacking today is hope, because how are we going to solve climate and health and humanity and all of these things, right? Well, they're going to be solved so elegantly and quickly that it's going to blow people's minds, because this revolution that's coming is a revolution from dissonance to resonance.
Incredible.
Because once the physics has been written, once the science exists and the technology developed, showing, okay, here's how we couple to it. Here's how we couple to the infinite amount of energy and information in the field. And that's all we need to do as for humanity to move into a whole nother level where we're going to start getting along. We're going to start solving problems. We're not going to have any perceptions of lack of anything.
I think that's beautiful. I think understanding as well that we're all interconnected. We literally are connected by quantum entanglement. We are one. We're not separated. I once heard that the illusion that we are separated is the reason that we are all suffering. So once we come back to that fundamental principle of we are all literally connected, we are all energy. There was a everything changes. There was a quote, and I can't remember it verbatim, but it was a quantum physicist back in the 50s saying, it's all based on one simple idea, and once we figure that simple idea, everything changes. And it sounds like you're very, very close to that one simple idea, understanding energy, understanding that we can extract energy from the field and we don't need to be using all these fossil fuels, etc. And for our bodies, of course, and unlimited supply of ATP energy to power the body. That is really fascinating.
Well, yeah, everything. It's going to change everything, and
yeah,
and it's it is figured out. It's got to be a little better, a little more defined, a little articulated, a little higher to become a little more elegant. But it's already happening.
Incredible.
And some technologies is out. Nassim's been sharing the physics for quite some time. But so yeah, it's happening now, and next year it's going to come out big with a couple of things that are happening. And so for everybody, hope is coming, and the hope is really on one thing, which is understanding resonance, and that we live in a field of unlimited information, unlimited energy, and the science, the technology is just starting to emerge that allows us to tap into that.
That is wonderful and phenomenal. Thank you so much for all the work you're doing. I always ask my interviewees what their number one vitality secret is. What is your number one vitality secret, Mark?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say that it's having an awareness. What we're doing it's not so trivial. It's there's been tremendous amounts of stress, and anytime you're trying to introduce something that's going to change everything, it's been challenging. And really the thing that allows me to prosper and to move forward is just going inside and clearly seeing in my mind's eye that we live in a field of energy and information, and all I have to do is remind myself of that, and then tune in to a channel of infinite amount of channels of a higher oscillation of information, and then instantly, boom, okay, I can be there and okay, we're good.
Good.
Yeah.
I love that. How long do you spend meditating a day?
Not long enough, but I wake up 4:45, somewhere around there. I try to go till 5:30. I try 45 minutes to an hour, and I would like to go longer. There's a lot to do right now, but that's what I tried to get in.
I wondered if meditation might be your number one vitality secret. Talking about
without a doubt. That's what,
yeah.
There's no question.
Yeah, I love the way you just explained it, because it's our opportunity to tune into the field. And there's a saying I once read it. I think it was Neil Donald Walsh's book. Those who don't go within go without.
Yes,
it's like the singular most powerful tool that we have available to us, and it's free. We need to understand the science of meditation and how it heals the body. It's phenomenal, and you're doing that.
Yeah, I'm supporting really great minds that are developing this. That's, as you said in the beginning, that's my role.
Yeah, I'd love to come and look at your labs. Your labs sound amazing. Jizen Labs in Northern California. Is it Northern California?
Yeah, Marin County. Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah, Jizen.com. JYZEN.
Thank you so much, Mark Hinds. I'd love to have another conversation with you another time. I know you need to go, and your time is super valuable, and you're booked probably by the minute. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Neil, thank you for your time. Really love what you're doing, and keep up the great work.
Thank you. Speak to you again soon.
Many good wishes.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you for listening to the Vitality Secret podcast. If you liked this, please leave a 5-star rating. And if you loved it, please take a few minutes to leave a review. The more ratings and reviews that are left, the easier it is for this life-changing information to get into the hands of people who need it. Reverse chronic illness, strengthen your immune system, and build resilience at vitalitysecret.com.